Hey everybody, welcome back to Trading with Artisan Will. This was a crazy week to start off March. Let's go do a brief recap and then we'll see how the state of the market is and then take a look at the top picks for the week of March 10th. So, first thing to note is that Meta and Netflix here, those short trades actually ended up playing out a bit. We actually managed to break down past the 50 EMA here. We retested it on the daily, and then we actually ended up collapsing and just breaking down. The interesting thing to note about Meta here is that we actually tapped the 600 almost perfectly. And this level is really important because not only is it a mental number, but it was a really big resistance point way back in October when it had its earnings report. So I think this is something you should still keep on your list. When this downtrend is broken, I think it's going to be really, really powerful to the upside. The other name is Netflix here. We managed to break that 950 really, really aggressively and fully gap fill. And we actually closed Friday of March 7th above that gap up level. With that in mind, let's take a look at the markets as a whole. So specifically on SPY, I want you guys to look at the weekly here with me. The weekly here is really important because we managed to close above this 575 level, and that could potentially indicate a bottom for the short term. I know, I'm not calling a bottom here, but it's just something really interesting to note and see and observe because closing above this level is pretty indicative that that might be some buying pressure dominating sellers here. I know that we are really close to tapping the 50 EMA here. I actually had an alert set near that 560, but we managed to not do that, and we actually got bought up. The other thing to note is the Qs. So tech will usually always lead the market as a whole in terms of whichever direction it's going, right? In this case, Qs look a lot weaker than SPY and the market as a whole. On the weekly time frame here, the Qs actually tapped the 50 EMA, and then we bounced a bit to close off the week. Now, this kind of coincides together, right? We tap the 50 EMA on the Qs. There might be some buying in the next 2 weeks, and that might indicate that SPY will potentially go up a little bit because we managed to close above this weekly candle of around 575. At least I think we can test the upper bounds of this gap fill that was filled, so around 585 and maybe even 590 in the short term. But obviously, we'll have to see. This kind of coincides well with the seasonality charts that you'll see online, where the beginning of March tends to be pretty rocky and potentially bearish, but then by week 2 and week 3 of March, you'll start to see some more buying pressure. And then seasonality wise, tech tends to be a lot better, and it's one of their best months in April. So I know I'm not calling for a bottom here, but it kind of looks like the timeline might play out the way that how it always does seasonality wise. So with that in mind, let's kick off week 2 of March 2025 and the top names I'm looking at. The first one is going to be Lemonade here. It's been consolidating in the zone from $40 to $30 for the past 3 months almost, right at the beginning of January to now. The really interesting part to look at is the reaction to earnings. We gapped down pretty aggressively, but look at that volume and that buying pressure to spring us right back into this consolidation zone. So I'm already in this position, but I think there will be really good opportunities to add into this once we actually get a close above this $40 level. So that was this big resistance point set here, but also we rejected it twice here, right? We wicked it on February 18th, and then we wicked it again at a very, very close level here on Monday, March 3rd. But I think once we're actually able to have a close above this 40 level, I think it's going to be a really, really aggressive move to at least 45. And I think if the momentum can continue, we're definitely going to be close to testing all-time highs at near $50 per share. The contracts I'm really looking at are either the March 21st 40 strike or the April 17th 40. I think that it might be better to buy time on this name, specifically just because of how much time it's been consolidating. Now, you have to remember, the more consolidation that a stock has, the more likely that that move, when it does happen, is going to be super explosive. But I'd rather buy time to be extra safe to make sure I don't actually get premium burned to capture that move as a whole. But maybe you can also be greedy and try to double dip it if there's an opportunity. You buy both strikes. The next name is going to be an insurance name as well. It's going to be Allstate. I really, really like how we're holding the 8 EMA here, and we ended up having a gap up, but now we're kind of digesting that move. And it's in this range from 203 to 195 here. I really, really like how it's looking here, and we actually curled to close Friday here. I think once we break this downward trend above 203, we're probably testing 207 to maybe even 210 and higher. So once we get this break here at 203, I'm setting an alert now. I'm looking at the April 17th 210 calls to enter. I think the first TP should be around this 207 area, and then aim for honestly 210 and above from there. The next name is going to be NEE, N-E-E. It's an utilities energy name here, and I really, really like how we're starting to, so on this earnings candle, we have another range from 67 to the $73 area. For the past 2 months or so, 3 months, we've been kind of range bound, and we're starting to poke around at this top part. If we're able to break and hold on the daily above the 73.5, I think the sky's the limit for this one. I think we can test 75, maybe even the upper wick of around here, around 78. I'm looking at the April 17th 75 calls. I think this one looks pretty good. This is a downward trend break too. If the market's willing, this is a really good name that could get some momentum. The next name is also energy. It's going to be Southern Company, ticker SO. Very similar. We had a earnings reaction, but this one looks a little stronger than NE here. We actually broke past this downward trend already, and we wicked close to this resistance at the highs at around 93. I think if we're able to break this recent high of day at around 92.3, I would look for an entry for either the March 21st 92 or the 94 strikes. To be extra safe, I think it might be even better to do the 90 call. But really what I want to look is to break this high and then have a close above this 93 level for a continuation to test 95 or maybe even $97 per share. And lastly, the last name is going to be PDD. It's a China name, but this gap fill to the upside looks really, really interesting. We actually saw some flow come in Friday for March 21st, and I believe some for leaps as well. I think this name looks really good if China continues to give out more stimulus news, but we also just kind of reacted well. We held the 50 EMA on the daily here, and we're just sticking right above the 8 EMA. If we're able to break past this high of around 124.38, which was Thursday's high, we're probably testing this gap here. And to be extra safe, you could potentially enter off the actual entry of price into this gap fill. I think if we're able to break it, we're going to gap fill at least to 127 and maybe even potentially test this 133 high that was made here. And then the chart's a little weird, but past 135, I think we can test around 140 on this name. Now, I have a few runner-ups that I'd like to look at too. The first one is going to be Apple. I know we talked about this one last week, but you have to look at the relative strength that this has. Just compare this chart to Meta, right? Meta, clear downward trend, Netflix, clear downward trend, and Amazon, clear downward trend. But the one differentiator out of the Mag 7 is going to be Apple here. Yes, we retested this trend line. We projected it pretty hard, but look at this doji that was printed here. And then look at the volume, but also the way the candle has closed for March 7th, the Friday candle. We actually reclaimed the exponential moving average and closed above all of them. I think Apple is going to lead for the next run up here. It's something that you should definitely still keep on your list. I am going to play it safe and look for an entry above this 245 area. That's a lot of resistance. It also coincides with the volume profile. It shows you there's a lot of volume nodes here where it's going to meet a lot of resistance most likely, which is why I'm really looking for the May 16th 255 calls. This contract has a lot of volume, but also high open interest. I think it's also giving enough time to let things shake out to potentially actually get this move. I think we can easily test 253 and honestly this new high if we continue and we get that anticipated move where April is really, really bullish for tech. The next name is going to be CoStar Group, CSGP. This is going to be internet services. I like this consolidation, honestly. We closed just shy of around this 79 high that was made, but it looks really, really good for potential longs here. If you set kind of like a trend line here, technically it's already broken it, right? Based off of Friday's price action here. On the weekly time frame, we're curling up too. We closed above all the EMAs, shows that it's healthy and there could be a potential sentiment change happening here. I think the March 21st 80 call or even the April 17th 80 strike is going to be good. If we can close on the daily above this 79.5 area, we're testing at least 82.5. The next name is going to be Zscaler as the runner-up. I kept this trend line here just to tell you kind of the story of what's happened. So we broke past this and then we ended up failing that continued breakout. We tried to hold above this trend line, but then the very next day we completely collapsed. But this is very similar to Lemonade. Look at the reaction off of earnings here. Not that great of a reaction in terms of like a gap down or a gap up, but then the very next 2 days, heavy, heavy volume. One of the biggest volumes that you've seen since the past last quarter earnings here. And we actually printed an inside day on the Friday candle. I think if we can break past this 211, which was Thursday's high, we're testing at least this previous high resistance of around 217, 218. So I'm looking at the March 21st 220 call, and you have to remember that there's a really, really nice gap to fill that starts at 227 all the way up to 235 here. I think this one is a slow mover that can probably be played multiple times. After the March 21st OPEX, we can probably look to roll them if it's favorable to the April 17th contracts. And lastly on the run-ups is going to be Abivai here. The continuation and strength on this name is just insane. Obviously, it's healthcare. Money's been flowing and rotating to healthcare for a while now, but I want to see and I'm interested to see if there's going to be a continuation on this name. We closed just shy of under this resistance at around 214.5. I think if we break past this and close it, we'll probably test 215 obviously, and then honestly 220 to get that contract and the money. So March 21st, 220 call. Obviously, this is going to be a little bit of an inverse to the market as a whole, which is which is why this is a runner-up name. I am probably anticipating to see that this will go against the market. So if tech starts to lead, Abivai and healthcare as a whole might start pulling back a bit. That is all for this week. Good luck with your trading, and I hope everyone is profitable.